Hey, welcome back. Today, we're tackling one of the most important skills you could ever develop, making those big, life-defining choices. We're going to break down the science of calculated risk and give you a real framework to stop guessing and start choosing with confidence.
You know, most of us think that if we just avoid risk, we're choosing safety. But what if that's completely backwards? In a world that's constantly changing, standing still is actually the biggest gamble you can take. The real risk isn't trying and failing. It's looking back in 10 years and being haunted by the fact that you never tried at all.
So, here's the root of the problem. We get paralyzed, not because the danger is real, but because our brains are running on some seriously ancient software. Our wiring is just not built to handle modern probability. It sees a risk, any risk, and it just floods our system with emotion. And that's how we end up confusing the feeling of fear with the actual facts on the ground. Today, we're going to fix it.
All right, so first things first. To make better choices, you have to understand why you're programmed to make bad ones in the first place. Let's get into your brain's ancient defect, the biology of no.
This brings us to a huge concept from psychologists Kahneman and Tversky. It's called loss aversion, and it's a cognitive bias that's hardwired into every single one of us. Put simply, your brain is designed to dramatically overvalue whatever you already have and undervalue what you could possibly gain. And this chart just shows it perfectly. Look at that imbalance. The psychological pain you'd feel from losing $100 is literally twice as strong as the joy you'd get from finding that exact same amount. That means your internal scale is already tipped towards doing nothing before your logical brain even gets a chance to weigh in.
So what's actually going on here is a battle inside your head. When you think about taking a risk, like asking for that raise or launching that side project, your amygdala, your brain's ancient alarm bell, just starts screaming danger. It treats a career move with the same life-or-death panic as seeing a tiger in the grass. Your job is to learn how to quiet that alarm and let the prefrontal cortex, the brain's CEO, step in and actually run the numbers.
And that's really the big takeaway here. The first step is just to recognize this biological lie for what it is. Acknowledge the fear. Thank your amygdala for trying to keep you safe, and then calmly tell it, I got this.
Okay, so once we've managed the fear, we can pull out our first tool and apply some simple, powerful math. This is called calculating expected value. Seriously, this is what professional poker players and venture capitalists use every single day to make huge decisions. Now, don't let the formulas scare you off. It's actually beautiful in its simplicity. All this does is force you to weigh the potential good stuff against the potential bad stuff, and then factor in how likely each one is to happen. It strips all the emotion out and just leaves you with the cold, hard logic.
Let's make this super real. Think about asking for a promotion. Okay, what's the lose scenario? A few minutes of awkwardness, right? The cost of that is super low. But the win? A big salary jump, more responsibility, that is a really high value. And even if you think there's only, say, a 10% chance they'll say yes, you'd be surprised how often the math works out in your favor.
So you run the numbers, and you get a final value. And here's the golden rule. If that number is positive, it is a mathematically smart risk to take. Period. The logic is sound, even if you still feel that fear. You completely change the question from, what if I fail, to, is the expected value positive?
But we can do even better. See, the smartest people don't just look for any positive bet. They hunt for something very specific, something special. And that brings us to maybe the most powerful idea in this whole toolkit, finding asymmetric bets. The difference is so simple, but it's absolutely profound. A symmetric risk, that's like a coin flip. You bet 100, you might win 100. An asymmetric risk, though, that's where your potential downside is small and limited, but your potential upside is massive, maybe even unlimited. These are the opportunities that really change the game. And this is so relevant today. Think about starting a YouTube channel, or a podcast, or some little side business. It's a perfect asymmetric bet. What's the worst that can happen? The downside is capped. You lose some time, maybe you feel a little embarrassed if no one watches, but the upside, it's totally uncapped. It could become a new career, a huge source of income, a whole new network of amazing people. So here's your checklist. It's a super simple two-step audit for any choice. Before you jump in, just ask yourself, 1, is the downside limited and do I know what it is? And 2, is the potential upside massive or even unlimited? If you can answer yes to both, you found yourself a golden opportunity. That's a risk worth taking. Okay, but what about those really big life decisions where the math is, well, it's fuzzy? Quitting that stable job to start a company, moving across the country. For those, we need a different kind of tool.
And that leads us to our final framework, which Jeff Bezos famously used, the regret minimization test. So here's how it works. When Bezos was trying to decide whether to leave his cushy Wall Street job to start Amazon, he did a little mental time travel. He projected himself forward and imagined he was 80 years old, looking back on his life. This simple shift in perspective is incredibly powerful for getting real clarity. And he asked himself this first question. He figured, even if Amazon was a total, spectacular failure, would his 80-year-old self regret having tried? And the answer for him was a clear no. He knew he'd actually be proud that he took a shot.
But this is the question that changed everything. He asked himself if his 80-year-old self would regret not trying. And he said he knew with 100% certainty that it would haunt him for the rest of his life. The pain of wondering what if would be so much greater than the sting of any failure.
And this just nails a deep, deep human truth. We are haunted by the chances we don't take, this so-called acts of omission. Why? Because failure is data, it's experience. You learn something from it. But inaction is just a void. It teaches you nothing and leaves you with nothing but that nagging question. What if?
So let's put it all together. You now have a 3-step toolkit you can use for pretty much any big decision. For the logical stuff, calculate the expected value. For those exciting opportunities, hunt for that beautiful asymmetry. And for the really big, personal, life-changing decisions, use the regret minimization test.
Because in the end, this isn't about being reckless. It's about being smart. It's about understanding that real safety is an illusion. The greatest risk you can possibly take is looking back on your life and realizing you played it so safe that you never discovered what you were truly capable of. So I'll leave you with this. Using the tools we just talked about, what is one calculated risk you're avoiding right now? Not because it's actually dangerous, but just because it feels scary. Run the numbers. Check for asymmetry. Ask your 80-year-old self. The answer might just be that it's time to make your move.